After 20 years of running rigs and rebuilding engines in the Midwest, I thought I'd left heavy machinery behind. But land has a way of calling you back. My father's fields stretched wide and golden under skies so open they seemed to swallow you whole. He worked those rows with a stubborn pride until his knees gave out, then left the property to me when the doctor said his days of climbing into a combine were over. By the time I came back, the fields had gone wild. Wheat that should have been harvested last season lay in tangled mats, weeds curling through broken fence posts, the old gravel road leading up to the homestead half swallowed by grass. Most people would have seen abandonment. I saw the bones of something worth saving. The house itself was nothing to brag about. A weather-stained farmhouse with chipped siding and a sagging porch, a place that creaked like it had grown tired of waiting for someone to care again. The barn leaned like an old man, but still stood proud enough to shelter the machines inside. My father's combine, an international harvester that had sat silent longer than I wanted to admit. The paint had faded to a dull red, rust crawling along the seams, but the heart of it, the engine, was still sound. For weeks I worked from dawn until the floodlights burned at night. I pulled out hoses brittle as dried corn stalks, cleaned carburetors choked with dust, replaced blades that had dulled to nothing more than ornaments. Grease under my fingernails, sweat rolling down my back, the steady hum of work that reminded me what it meant to belong to a place. Every turn of the wrench brought the combine closer to life, and every clank echoed against memories of my father's voice, steady, patient, teaching me the difference between doing a job and doing it right. The neighbors watched, some with polite curiosity, others with tight smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Stone Creek development had crept up on this side of the property line in the years I'd been away. Cookie-cutter houses stacked side by side, driveways lined with matching SUVs, sprinklers misting lawns trimmed short enough to shame a golf course. It wasn't farmland anymore. It was staging ground for backyard barbecues and HOA newsletters. I didn't think much of it. Their world was theirs. Mine was here, in the cracked earth and wide fields, until Karen showed up. The first time I saw her, she wasn't on my property, just leaning over the new vinyl fence that separated her manicured backyard from my dirt road. Short blonde bob, oversized sunglasses even though the sky was overcast, a posture so stiff it seemed held together by rules alone. She had the look of someone who believed the universe rotated on her permission. "You plan on keeping that thing running out here?" she called, pointing toward the combine with a manicured finger. "Sure do," I said, wiping my hands on a rag, her lips pressed thin. "This is a residential road. We have children, pets, families. It's not safe to be hauling industrial equipment around." I looked at the gravel beneath my boots, at the road my father had laid stone by stone long before her subdivision was even a surveyor's sketch. "This road? It's mine. Been ours for 3 generations. Karen's eyebrows lifted like she'd just heard a joke without a punchline. "That can't be right. All access here runs through Stone Creek Estates. Roads are community managed. You can't just claim ownership." I didn't argue. I just walked back toward the barn, grease rag still in hand. Let her stew. But she didn't just stew. The next morning, I found a typed letter folded neat against my porch rail. Notice of violation. It claimed my equipment violated community standards. That moving heavy machinery along Willow Run Drive posed hazards to residential tranquility. I crumpled it and tossed it into the burn barrel without a second thought. Then came the stares. SUVs slowing as they passed, drivers shaking their heads. Someone left a flyer on my mailbox about neighborhood safety initiatives. That night, a drone buzzed low over the wheat, its red eye glowing against the dark. I waved it off like a mosquito, all of it. The notes, the stares, the drone didn't rattle me. But I could feel something building, like the steady pressure of a storm before it breaks. And sure enough, when harvest season rolled around and the combine roared to life for the first time in years, Karen was ready. Harvest season didn't wait for arguments, and wheat wasn't a crop you could afford to delay. By mid-July, the heads were full, swaying under the sun like an ocean of gold, and every day I delayed risked rain, mold, or worse. I'd spent weeks tuning up the combine, checking belts, sharpening blades, changing filters. That old John Deere wasn't pretty, but it was reliable. The kind of machine built to last longer than the people who drove it. The morning I started cutting, I rose before the sun. The horizon was still bruised purple when I climbed into the cab, thermos in one hand, hat pulled low. The machine roared awake, a sound that felt like home to me, but to Karen, it was probably the apocalypse. As I eased the combine into the first row, the stalks fell cleanly, the reel sweeping them inward, the header chewing through decades of family memory. For me, harvest wasn't just work. It was ritual. Every pass down the row felt like reclaiming something bigger than grain. It was my father's lessons, my grandfather's sweat, my own years of sacrifice, stitched together in a field that didn't care about HOA newsletters or community standards. By the third pass, I noticed movement along the road. Alexis parked crooked at the edge of the asphalt. Out stepped Karen, dressed in tennis whites, visor shading her face, phone already raised like a weapon. She stood dead center on the narrow strip of gravel, right where the road cut through my property. She didn't just watch. She planted herself like a blockade. I slowed the combine, more out of instinct than concession. The road ran directly between my north and south parcels, and for decades, my family had been the only ones who needed it. But once Stone Creek went up, the HOA insisted it was community access. I knew better. I had the surveys, the titles, the dusty legal paperwork to prove it was mine. Yet there she stood, arms crossed now, daring me to move forward. Dust rose as the combine idled, wheat stalks trembling in the hot wind. I cracked the door and climbed down, boots hitting the gravel with a solid thud. "Morning," I called, rag already damp from the sweat I'd been wiping away. Karen didn't return the greeting. Instead, she jabbed her phone toward me like a prosecutor delivering Exhibit A. "You can't block this road," she snapped, her voice sharp even over the hum of the machine. "This is for residents. You're trespassing with that monstrosity." I glanced back at the combine. Green paint faded, exhaust pipe rattling faintly. A monstrosity to her. "A lifeline to me, this road?" I said evenly, pointing to the gravel beneath her designer sneakers. "This road is mine. Been in my family longer than Stone Creek has existed." She laughed then, short and sharp, like she couldn't believe my nerve. "That's ridiculous. It's clearly part of the subdivision. We've had joggers, cyclists, children using this road. And you think you can tear through it with that?" She motioned to the wheat dust still floating behind the combine like smoke. I pulled a folded paper from my back pocket, laminated now after years of skirmishes. The survey lines, the county seal, the signature of the clerk, proof. I held it out, but she didn't even look. She just tightened her grip on the phone, already snapping pictures. "You'll be hearing from the HOA," she said, voice trembling with self-importance. "We're filing a complaint for obstruction, noise, and environmental impact. You're choking us with your dust." I shook my head slowly, feeling the sun bake down harder with every word. "It's harvest, Karen. Wheat grows dust. Machines make noise. You move next to farmland. This is how it works." But her eyes told me reason wasn't part of the conversation. She wasn't here for facts. She was here for control. Behind her, 2 more cars slowed, neighbors rubbernecking at the spectacle. One driver rolled down a window, snapping a picture before moving on. Word would spread fast like it always did. Karen wasn't just fighting me, she was staging a show for her audience. I climbed back into the cab, refusing to let her stage hold me hostage. The combine rumbled forward, steady, slow, deliberate. Karen stepped back at the last moment, retreating to the safety of her Lexus, but not before I saw her mouth form the words, "This isn't over." The wheat parted cleanly as the header rolled on. Dust rose in golden clouds. My hand stayed firm on the controls, but my gut told me the harvest wouldn't be the only battle I'd have to finish this season, because Karen had just declared war on my land. And the road between us had become the battlefield. By the second week of harvest, the wheat wasn't the only thing piling up. Letters started showing at my gate, slipped under the rusted mailbox flap like smug little reminders that I wasn't in compliance. The HOA's logo sat at the top of every one, bold serif font, fancy watermark seal, like it gave them authority over my life. Words like obstruction, hazard, and violating community standards leapt off the page. The first few, I tossed into the burn barrel with the other junk. But the stack grew, and so did the pressure. Neighbors who'd once waved half-heartedly from their yards now stared openly. Kids who used to ride bikes near the road were suddenly kept closer to home, as if my fields carried disease. Even the clerk at the diner downtown, a woman I'd known since high school, mentioned she'd heard things about my antics. Karen was running her own campaign, painting me as the villain, threatening their neat little paradise. It wasn't the first time I'd been cast as the bad guy. Overseas, propaganda twisted truth into something unrecognizable every day. But there I knew the enemy. Here it was a woman in tennis whites with a visor and a clipboard, pulling strings through whispers and newsletters. The real tipping point came on a humid Tuesday morning. I was halfway through the southern field, sweat soaking through my shirt, when I noticed flashing lights bouncing off the tree line. A county sheriff's cruiser rolled slowly up the gravel road, the same road Karen had stood on days before. I killed the combine engine and climbed down, boots sinking into the dust. The deputy stepped out, young, polite, but already uneasy. He adjusted his belt and looked around like he wasn't sure where the property line even fell. "Morning, sir," he started carefully. "We got a call about blocked access and potential safety hazards." Behind him, Karen's Lexus sat parked at the corner, her silhouette just visible in the driver's seat, phone no doubt aimed at us. She wanted this moment documented. "This isn't county access," I said evenly, pulling the folded survey from my pocket before he could continue. "It's private. Been in my family for 3 generations. Here's the paperwork." The deputy glanced at the survey, nodded slowly, then looked back at the road. "Well, sir, I don't see any public signage here. That means if it's private, you're within your rights. I'll file this as unfounded. It should have ended there." But Karen didn't like the word unfounded. She climbed out of her car, sunglasses already in place, voice raised for the audience she imagined watching from behind curtains. "This is harassment," she snapped. "We can't breathe in this dust. Our community is being endangered by heavy equipment. This man is endangering children. He has no regard for safety." The deputy shifted uncomfortably, caught between her tirade and my silence. I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue. I just stood there, the paper still in my hand, the combine rumbling quietly behind me like a sleeping beast. Finally, the deputy cleared his throat. "Ma'am, unless you can produce documents showing this road belongs to your HOA, there's nothing further I can do. This is agricultural land and he's within his rights." Karen's jaw tightened, lips pressed so thin they nearly disappeared. She didn't argue further, but her eyes told me it wasn't over. Not even close. That evening, when I parked the combine and walked back toward the house, I spotted something new. A row of small plastic signs staked into the ground just past the property line. Bright white letters on a green background. Community Access Road. Respect our neighborhood standards. She was rewriting reality one sign at a time, and I knew. As the cicadas buzzed loud in the twilight and the wheat fields swayed behind me, that harvest had turned into something else entirely. This wasn't just about crops anymore. It was about ownership, about who had the right to claim the land. Beneath their feet, and Karen had just drawn her battle lines in plastic and ink. The next days felt like déjà vu on repeat. Every sunrise meant another move from Karen. The signs multiplied, sprouting along the gravel like invasive weeds. By Friday, 6 stood lined in a row, angled just so they faced my property, not the subdivision. They weren't for the neighbors. They were for me. The words grew sharper, too. "No trespassing. Private HOA road. Violators will be reported." Bold letters, laminated against the weather, anchored with fresh posts that hadn't seen a storm yet. Every time I drove the combine past, I could see her curtain twitch on the 2nd story. She was watching, waiting for me to react. But I didn't touch her signs. Not yet. Instead, I worked. The wheat wasn't going to cut itself, and for every acre cleared, I felt a little more grounded. The machine hummed along, blades spinning, the field thinning row by row. I lost myself in the rhythm until the drone came back. It was late afternoon, the sun bleeding gold across the stalks, when I heard the faint buzz. A speck hovered above the combine, dipping lower, circling slow. Same black quadcopter as before, camera lens glinting. I knew exactly whose hands were on the controller. I waved, not out of friendliness, but to make it clear I saw it. The drone lifted, pivoted, then darted back toward the row of Stone Creek rooftops. Hours later, my phone buzzed. A friend from town forwarded me the HOA's latest email blast. There it was, my combine, framed like a monster devouring the land. The caption, "Unsafe machinery operating near residential zone. Community concerns growing." Below it, Karen's neat summary of environmental hazards, complete with exaggerated claims about fuel leaks and air quality risks. I stared at the email, heat prickling the back of my neck. She wasn't just fighting me in the field. She was waging a war of perception, one I couldn't win with facts alone. The next morning, her escalation went further. I climbed into the cab at dawn, only to find orange cones set across the gravel road. Not just a few, an entire barricade complete with yellow caution tape strung between them. A handwritten sign flapped in the breeze. Road closed. Community Safety Initiative. I shut off the engine and stepped out, boots crunching against the gravel. The tape fluttered, cones casting long shadows in the early light. My road, my property, now dressed like a construction site at the hands of a woman who thought rules bent to her will. I pulled my phone, snapped a picture, and sent it to the county office. Then I kicked the nearest cone aside, the hollow plastic tumbling into the ditch. I tore the tape down in one pull and tossed it on the pile. By mid-morning, Karen was back at the fence line, this time with two neighbors in tow. One man in a golf polo, the other with a dog leash wrapped around his wrist. She pointed, gestured, played ringleader while the others nodded like parishioners at a sermon. I didn't stop the combine. I didn't step down. I just kept driving, wheat falling in golden waves around me, dust rising like smoke between us. Let her fume. Let her rally her troops. Because she still hadn't grasped the truth. The road she kept claiming wasn't just old family dirt. It wasn't just a shortcut through my land. It was written, ink on paper, in the county's records. My property, my right-of-way, my ownership, and when the time came, I would put that truth in front of more than her HOA newsletter. Karen thought she was playing a game of neighborhood politics. She didn't realize she'd walked into a legal war she couldn't win. By the last week of harvest, the tension had grown thicker than the dust hanging over the fields. Karen's campaign had turned the neighborhood into her stage. Every morning, new signs. Every evening, another HOA email packed with phrases like environmental abuse and reckless endangerment. Some neighbors bought it, others stayed silent, too polite or too scared to challenge her. But I had something stronger than silence. I had proof. The county surveyor met me on a Thursday afternoon, clipboard in hand, boots sinking into the same gravel Karen swore belonged to her. I walked him through the boundaries, pointing out the markers buried in the ditch line, the old fence posts my grandfather had sunk before I was born. He nodded, checked his maps, and signed off with a single sentence that carried more weight than all of Karen's newsletters combined. This road is part of your deeded property. It is not, and never has been, under HOA jurisdiction. I asked for 3 certified copies, sealed and stamped. He handed them over without hesitation. The very next morning, I put 1 copy in an envelope addressed to the county office, another in my safe, and the 3rd I carried with me. Because I knew exactly where I was headed. The HOA's monthly meeting was held in the Stone Creek clubhouse, a beige stucco box with French doors and a chandelier too grand for its size. Karen presided at the front like a judge, flanked by her board members. Residents filled the folding chairs, whispering in low tones until I stepped inside. The room quieted, all eyes on me, dust still clinging to my boots and shirt from the field. Karen's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Dawson," she said sweetly, her voice amplified by the cheap microphone. "We weren't expecting you. Is there something you'd like to share with the community?" I walked to the front, unfolded the survey, and laid it flat on the table. The county seal gleamed under the fluorescent light. "This road," I said, tapping the map with one calloused finger, "is mine. It's been mine since my grandfather bought this land. It was never dedicated to Stone Creek, never signed over to the HOA. The county confirmed it yesterday. Legally, you have no claim." The room shifted. A few residents leaned forward. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Karen's face tightened, but she tried to recover, her voice rising. That may be what you say, but we have visual covenants. No, I cut in, my voice steady, measured. You have covenants for your subdivision. Not for this land, not for this road. You can write emails, post signs, fly drones, but the law is the law. And it doesn't belong to you. I slid the paper closer so everyone could see. You moved next to farmland. Farms have dust. Farms have machinery. Farms harvest. If you wanted silence, you should have picked a cul-de-sac in town. For the first time, Karen didn't have a comeback. Her mouth opened, closed, then tightened into a thin line. Behind her, one of the board members coughed, muttered something about clarifying boundaries. The silence in the room felt like victory. Not loud, not triumphant, just solid, grounded, like the earth beneath my boots. I folded the survey, tucked it back into my jacket, and left without another word. That evening, as I fired up the combine for the last stretch of wheat, I noticed something different. No Karen at the fence. No Lexus parked on the road. No new signs sprouting from the gravel. The field stretched ahead, golden under the sinking sun, rows falling cleanly as the machine rolled forward. With each pass, I felt the weight lift, not just of the harvest, but of the fight itself, because the land had spoken. The records had spoken, and for once, even Karen had no choice but to hear it. By the time I parked the combine and shut off the engine, the sky was streaked in red and orange, the kind of colors that made you pause, even after a long day's work. I stood there, hands on my hips, breathing in the dust and the silence. This farm wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was mine, and no HOA president with a clipboard and a drone could ever take that away.